Hello, welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green. And with me today is, you'll be shocked that he just told me this just before, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But for someone who has written so much in such little amount of time, which we'll get into, I'm delighted to have with me Peter Servidio, the author of The Earth Has Fallen Quadrilogy, which is a word that I always get wrong, but I did it correctly for the first time in my life right now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, David. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. So before we started recording, you just told me that you only really started publishing in June this year.
Yeah.
So that's quite incredible because we're recording this and it is the 29th of December. So in 6 months, just how much stuff have you done in the last 6 months?
Over the past 6 months, I've released about 30 books. Of those 30, I'd say about 12 of them are fiction, science fiction based. And then I have a bunch of other books I've done kind of under my other hat of Dr. Servidio, where I'm a doctor in education. I teach at the university here at the University of Maine at Augusta, as well as work for the prison as a teacher up here in the state of Maine for the DOC. And so I've released a bunch of books along the lines of, dealing with education, learning, consulting, stuff like that, under my other hat. So total of about 30 books in 6 months. And my wife laughs all the time because she's like, where do you find the time? And I said, well, know that when I'm sitting in my chair and I'm ignoring you, looking like I'm on my phone, I'm actually just typing away.
Yeah. I mean, that is the. I don't want to try and like undersell that either. Because my accent and my like kind of tone is quite laid back and quite deadpan. That's just where I'm from. We all sound like this. But 30 in 6 months, that is quite the achievement. That's 5 books a month. Like, and it doesn't matter what kind of fiction or non-fiction. That is quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot in the head that I still got to get out too up there. So
Right.
it's 45 years of stuff just floating around up here. I said it's time to put it on paper and get it out there. So
Yeah. So I take it that you've always wanted to be a writer in some
yeah.
kind of way.
Yeah, even when I was younger, I used to always write stories. Of course, growing up back in the 80s, playing Dungeons and Dragons, we were always creating our own stories, doing that, creating our characters and our backgrounds. And it's something I've done for fun my whole life. And really looking at Amazon and when self-publishing started to come out, I was like, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could do it. I don't know if I had the time. And then this June, like I said, I really started looking into it some more. Talked with Brian Cohan from the Amazon ad school a little bit. I met him online and we started chatting. One of his gentlemen that worked with Quinn and I started talking, and Quinn sells, God, I want to be like him someday. He sells $100,000 in books a year. And we won't get into what he writes, but I told him I can't write that genre. But he was like, you should, it's, the money's there. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'll write what I like.
Yeah.
But it's been crazy. So yeah, writing is something I've always done. And one thing I was told many years ago by one of my English professors was don't throw anything out. And looking in hindsight now, like I'll go to that milk crate I got in my closet and I have things I wrote when I was 6 years old. I got things I wrote when I was 26 years old. And I'll go back and grab some of that for inspiration now and be like, wow, that really sucked back then. But I can make it better now.
Yeah. It's funny how that happens because I'm similar to you. I didn't start writing until only a couple of years ago, really, and it's not even 2 years ago actually. It's just less. But I write a lot of I do a bit of horror, but I do mostly fantasy and stuff like that. And I was going through the attic a while ago just to see what we could throw out. We're just doing a clear out, right? And it was. I just found like we'd only moved recently enough as well, and the only move you just move just crap to another place, from another place to another place. I was just looking through a box and I found like these old notebooks that I had from when I was in high school, and it had these like ideas in there for a fantasy book, which I did when I was about 14 or something. And I was looking at them and I was like, the names are awful. Like there are all these like Tolkien rip-off names and everything, right? I was like, the idea for the book that I'd written recently was there, and I'd forgotten about it, that I'd actually written it down like 20 odd years ago, but it was there still. So it must have just been lodged into my head somewhere as well. And I was just like, this is so weird. I was like, what else is in here? Is in these notebooks?
I'm sure you can surprise yourself flipping through them too, because you'll find stuff like, wow, I had no idea I wrote that. Or
Yeah, and my handwriting was much better than it is now as well. So that was also a surprise. So what kind of things? I take it you're a reader as well. What kind of things did you like to read before you started writing?
yeah, growing up, Forgotten Realms, the fantasy novels. R.A. Salvatore has been my number one favorite author from the minute I picked him up, and I keep wanting to reach out to him and be like, "Hey, check this out." But I'm sure everyone does that, right? But I get people I've spoken with in some of the forums that I'm in. Actually knows Bob, so he's like, "Maybe I can connect you to say hi." I'm like, "If you do that, my perfect. I'm done."
Yeah, yeah.
Big Feist, read a lot of him. Stephen King, of course, being from Maine as well. I'm actually reading his newest one called Later Now, which is a pretty cool book.
Hmm.
You know, but I read everything. I mean, Jane Patterson, the classics. I actually studied Shakespeare in college, which
Right.
all my friends I was an idiot. They're like, "Good luck with that," and I'm like, "I enjoyed reading. It was fun. I read 400-page paper on the Ghost, and Hamlet, and it was things that were enjoyable to me. But I read everything across the board. But R.A. Salvatore is probably the author that I would go back to say that he is really the one that sowed my passion for reading, and then thinking about, hey, can I write like this?
Right.
I do that, and he really got me going into that direction.
Yeah. I came across him in a really roundabout way. I didn't know he did fantasy stuff. This was like a long time ago, but I was really into the Star Wars novels when I was a kid. And they were launching this like new series called New Jedi Order. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And Salvatore was writing the first one, and he
Yep.
kills Chewbacca
Yeah.
in it, right? By dropping a nuke on him. And this is like 2000 maybe or something. And I was like, what a bastard. How could he kill Chewbacca? But then I understood why. But then I kind of looked into him because I was like so like enraged by how this guy had killed Chewbacca as well. And then I was like, oh, he has all these fantasy books as well. I'll check them out because I was a big fantasy fan. And so that's how I got into him because I was so annoyed that he'd killed Chewbacca. So if I ever met him, that's what I would say to him. I was like, I read all your work because you killed Chewbacca.
I'll make sure if I ever do talk to him, I'll bring that up and say, just so you know.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. So how many? I'd love to know, like, how, because I remember, like, that was like the birth of, like, the kind of like the very kind of like birth of message boards and all that kind of stuff. And people were so annoyed about them killing Chewbacca. And like any other time now, like, since become an adult, and everyone kind of gets annoyed about something to do, particularly with Star Wars. I'd be like, someone dropped the moon on Chewbacca. Like that, that happened.
I think we need to go onto Reddit and see if we have a Reddit thing going there. I bet you there's going to be a whole blog on Reddit about that.
Probably is, yeah, there probably is. But the people are annoyed that it doesn't count anymore. It's not canon anymore. So people are annoyed about that, and it's like, well, do you want Chewbacca to be dead? Like, it's that's the way it is. So your book, so the latest one, you had a book out on the 26th of December. Just so when we're recording, this was 3 days ago, and it was the fourth book in your Earth Has Fallen series. And now you have a lovely box set of them as well.
Yes, yeah.
So this one is New Frontier, but I mean, we could talk about the whole series because obviously the first one only probably came out in June, I presume, or July.
Yeah,
So
I think in like late July, early August, the first one came out finally. Yep.
yeah, okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the whole series? Because obviously it's Earth Has Fallen. You know what it's going to. It's going to be a post-apocalyptic story. It's a great title for it. Why don't you tell us all a little bit about it?
Definitely. So I was trying to think of what to write, and I actually had the title came to me when I was sleeping. I woke up at 3 a.m, and I was like, Earth has fallen. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper beside the bed. And I'm like, I gotta write a story about this. So I was trying to lay out, what could cause the end of the world. And of course, we have a million different reasons.
Yeah.
So I went, being a youth of the Cold War era, I went back to the idea of nuclear war and what would actually happen if we had a full global nuclear fallout. So I started researching on nuclear weapons, nuclear war, devastation, nuclear winters. And I decided I wanted to write a story about the survivors and what that would be like. So I ended up writing about, in the first book, Return from Darkness, I kind of lay out at the beginning. It's a little more Kelly, not show, to start the book for the first intro and first chapter or two, trying to lay the foundation of this global disaster where we go from, over 7 billion people to under a billion people in the matter of months. All the nuclear powers decide to just unleash. No one knows who started the war, but we were all going to finish it. All the countries are like, nope, we're not going to be the ones that are left out. So I focus on a small community called Toleran, which is located in Utah, in one of the Emery Deep mines, which is a mine out in Utah by Salt Lake City. And this group kind of survived down by going to the bottom of the mine and survived underground. And the nuclear winter ends up lasting a lot longer than it should have. Everyone said 10 years, things are going to be fine, we'll be back on the surface. And they're looking at 50, 60 years after the war, and there's still nuclear fallout. The sun hasn't come back. The surface is destroyed. And pretty much throughout the series, you follow the life of Laredo Ricker, who is a young man. He's, when the book starts, he's just turning 17, going to be 18. And he is chosen to be what's called a topsider, to go out and scavenge and see if life's coming back on top. And without giving too much detail of the series itself, he finds himself in some sticky situations, and he discovers there is some life on the surface, both good and not so good. And ends up meeting some other societies that have existed as well. And there's one society in particular called Elysium Fields, where they're living a lot better than anybody else in the world because they've discovered some neat technology, which is making their life, their return to the surface of the earth much quicker and much easier. However, because their fear is if they share that with other communities and it doesn't work, they're going to be overrun. And if so what's going to happen? So he goes through that whole situation, and the series follows him through that. It follows him through going, looking for other societies, finding other societies, looking for some cures for some of the people on the surface, trying to bring back humanity. And eventually in the fourth book, we'll see where they actually travels from the West Coast of the United States to the East Coast. And actually, in New Frontier, they discover some pretty neat stuff going on out there as well. I'm going to leave that up to the imagination. I'll let you guys read the book to get the details on that, because I'm really bad at not spilling the beans, and I want to tell you the whole story right now, but I'm not going.
Fair enough. It's something that I love post-apocalyptic stuff. I love the movies. I love reading books. I've written a short, like a novella, one as well called A Place Beyond the Storm, which is they're all driven underground because the rain can kill people. Nice. So they have to. Our society's gone underground, right? I love that whole kind of setting, and there's something about setting them in America, which is great, because the one I wrote was actually set in Portugal, because I was like, everything's set in America, and I'm not American, so I'm not going to do it. I'll set one. I'm not Portuguese either, but I've been there quite a lot. But like, there's something just about America with the size of the country, where and the different types of landscapes that you can get. And you were talking about the fourth one, New Frontier, which I presume it's a play on frontierism and everything as well, which is something else that fascinates me. Where do you get like that kind of inspiration for it? Is that a subject that kind of fascinates you as well? Are you well traveled around America? Because you said you're from Maine. Do you have that kind of same thing where you look at other states and you look at other parts of the country where you're like, wow, I would love to go and experience that?
Yeah, definitely. I've been actually very blessed, having been a professor for UMA and having been teaching for 25 years now. I've actually been able to speak at national conferences throughout the country as well. So I've been able to travel around to the West Coast, to the South. Of course, East Coast is easy. I'm here up and down the East Coast. But being able to see new states, new landscapes, it's so weird going, say, from Maine to Florida and then to Nevada. And it's so drastically different, and thinking, well, we're still in the same country, but it's so different. And using that type of landscape and atmosphere of the stories to show the differences in people. Because in a post-apocalyptic situation, I look at, like, if I'm in Maine and we have an apocalypse, or I'm in Utah, we're going to survive very different ways. And it may hit us very differently as well, not just landscape-wise, but weather-wise, cold versus rain versus snow. So I've always enjoyed that idea, and I've always been enthralled by the end of the world. Again, I say it's because, being a product of the Cold War era, where we lived with it every day, where it's like, who's going to hit the bomb first, Russia or us? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's always fascinated me, and there's so many different ways. This is the psychotic writer in my head thinking there's so many different ways we can end the world. Right?
Yeah. And it's funny as well, because I mean, the thing with the end of the world, I think as well, that does fascinate people, is because a lot of our cultures and civilizations are built on civilizations that don't exist anymore because they ended, right, in one way or the other, through genocide or just the natural end of that cycle. So it's around us all the time. Like my son is just getting into Egyptology, so he wants to watch videos on Egypt, and it's like, well, it's people wandering around in a civilization that doesn't exist anymore, right? In the ruins of an old world. So it's kind of something that does fascinate us as a people.
Yeah, and like we all survived Y2K, which I thought that was it, right? So
Right.
we were still
Back in the day, that's an old one, isn't it? Just imagine trying to explain that to someone from who was born in the last few years. We all thought the world was going to end in the year 2000. Why? Because we just never thought the computers could cope with it. That's why.
Computers are gonna stop counting. That was it.
Yeah. So what's next for you? We were talking before we recorded that you've got not content with finishing one series, you've got the start of another series that is February. I think you said you were saying it's going to come out. What's that one about?
Yeah, so this next series I'm working on now, it's called Agents of Tomorrow, and again, it's post-apocalyptic. And because of the time we're living in with the virus going on with COVID and everything else, of course, I had to make that the catalyst of the end of the world this time, just so I can either get people really upset, or So I started that, and book 1 is totally written right now. It's in review and editing, and book 2 is almost done. So book 1 is going to be coming out. I believe I'm shooting for February 18th is the release date for book 1, and it's going to follow a different kind of hero this time. This is going to start with a gentleman who's actually in one of the penitentiaries, who's imprisoned in Washington State, and he's going to become one of the main characters, not by choice, kind of forced into it. And he's always been a rebel, a loner, done his own thing. And by his own admission in the book, he's in prison because of what he's done. He should be there. He believes he should be in prison the rest of his life. But because of what happens, he finds himself with a newfound freedom. And part of his newfound freedom is protecting a 12-year-old little girl that was one of his friends. So he's going to be in a situation that's going to be really tough for him to kind of figure out and handle, because all of a sudden it's going to be not about him, it's about her, and how do you keep her safe as well as move forward in this devastation of what's going on. And then we'll follow that through the series. In book 2, we're going to meet some of these scientists that were involved in the creation of the outbreak, what's going on, and how they tie back to the characters in book 1. In book 3, we'll meet a few others, and in book 4, I'm shooting for a culmination where they're going to meet in what's called the safe zone. Of course, the safe zone is going to be somewhere down in probably, I think I put it in Mexico at this point. I think it's Guadalajara, just for fun, because I've never been to Guadalajara, but I want to go. So I'm doing some research on that, and I thought it'd be kind of neat to have the area where people might be able to find some safety and some rest not be somewhere in America or Canada, because obviously it's like America and Canada are the two places people go to, right? It's over the side. But I say, no, I think Mexico is going to be a fun part, because I'm going to play with that whole idea too of the border wall. We had a lot of issues last few years about the border wall and not across the wall. So Mexico is going to have some stuff where they can help us. But then again, why go across the wall? And they're going to want to know why we want to cross their wall, because we didn't want them coming across. So it's going to be a little political background as well, which I like to do, throw some stuff in there to make people think. I'm not going to put out my political stances in the forefront, but I like to make others think about where they stand and kind of question those things and get them really involved.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about being a writer, is you can throw those things out there, and you don't have to come down on one side or the other. You can just let people kind of make their own mind up about it. You can subtly nudge them in certain ways if you want to as well. But that's the way. So Peter, thanks so much for coming on to the show today. Where can everyone that's listening on Spotify or Apple Music or watching us on YouTube, where can they keep up to date with your many books that are coming out in 2022?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, you can always find me on Instagram at Servidio Peter. You can find me on Amazon.com, Peter Servidio, Facebook, Writings by Servidio, and then also I have my own website, which is called Writings by Servidio. It's www.acp41.wix.writing by Servidio. I've been too cheap to pay for the domain name yet. That'll be coming year. But yeah, I'm all over the place, and thank you so much for having me on. If you guys want to check me out, please do so. If you want to shoot me an email, acp41@gmail.com. I love emails. I always respond. Join my mailing list, get freebies, all the fun stuff that we like to say.
Yeah,
And what am I? That's what I'm selling right there. Start with book one.
So all of the links for people that are listening and watching, all the links for Peter will be in the show notes. So do go and check them all out. And send him an email. Send him an email about your favorite end of the world story, or reason why the world would end anyway. Peter, best of luck for 2022. You'll have to come on talk to me at the end of the year and tell me about the 50 odd books that you brought out in this year.
Most, David, thank you so much for having me. You take care and stay safe.
Thanks, you too. And for everyone that's listening and watching, thanks for staying with us till the end. Until next time.